My name's Eric, I'm 38, and my wife, Anna, is 36. We've been married for 11 years, and if you asked me 6 months ago, I would have told you we had a good life. Not perfect, but solid. We have no kids. Anna was always on the fence, and I didn't push it. But we have a nice house, decent jobs, and a routine that worked for us. Or so I thought. Anna's always been intense. She's ambitious, smart, and has a way of making people feel 2 inches tall if they get on her bad side. I used to admire her fire, it was part of what drew me to her. But lately, that fire's been directed at me. Started small. She began working late more often, saying her marketing job was demanding more of her. I didn't question it. Her industry's competitive, and she thrives on pressure. Then came the business trips. Conferences, she called them, always last minute and always out of state. At first, I didn't think much of it. Anna's job involved networking, so the travel made sense. But something felt off. She'd come home from these trips distant, distracted, and short-tempered. I'd ask her how it went, and she'd give me curt answers like, "Fine. Same old, same old." Then, one evening, she dropped a name I hadn't heard before. "Alex. He's one of the speakers at the conference," she said over dinner, scrolling through her phone like she couldn't care less. "Really smart guy." We had a long chat about some of my campaigns. I didn't think much of it at the time. She worked with people all the time. But as the weeks went on, Alex's name started coming up more often. She'd laugh about something he said, mention an email he sent, or casually bring up his unique perspective. That was the first red flag. The name Alex began to bother me. It wasn't what Anna said about him. It was how she said it. Her tone would shift whenever she brought him up, and there was a little too much enthusiasm in her voice for someone she supposedly only knew professionally. One night, as Anna packed for yet another conference, I tried to be casual. "So, will Alex be there again?" She froze for half a second before turning back to her suitcase. "Probably," she said with a shrug. "He's on the speaking circuit a lot." "Why?" "No reason," I said, trying to sound uninterested. "Just curious." She gave me a look I couldn't quite read. "Don't start getting all jealous on me, Eric. It's not a good look." Jealous? I wasn't jealous, I was suspicious. When she left the next morning, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in my gut. Something wasn't adding up. So, for the first time in our marriage, I did something I never thought I'd do. I snooped. I started with her laptop, figuring she'd have left it behind since she only packed her work tablet. The first thing I noticed was that her email was logged out, which was weird. Anna never logged out of anything. But the second thing I found hit me like a punch to the stomach. A folder on her desktop labeled Conference Notes, Q2. It seemed harmless, but when I opened it, I found a document titled Alex Meeting. The document was sparse, just a few bullet points about some marketing strategy discussion. But what stood out was the tone. It wasn't professional. It was flirtatious. Alex suggested we grab dinner to discuss campaign ideas. Alex thinks I'm witty and brilliant. Alex said his wife doesn't understand him. What does that even mean? I felt sick. This wasn't just professional banter. It was something more. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I needed more. I checked her phone. She always kept it locked, but I knew her passcode, her birthday. Felt wrong, invading her privacy like this, but I had to know. Sure enough, there were texts from someone labeled simply as A. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. Anna, me too. Counting down the days until our next trip." My stomach twisted. The timestamps on the messages coincided perfectly with her conferences. I kept scrolling, my chest tightening with every word. It was all there, the flirting, the secret meetups, the late-night messages. But the more I read, the more something felt off. The messages were too perfect, almost scripted. And there were no photos, no emojis, no inside jokes, nothing personal. It was like Anna was writing for an audience, not a lover. That's when I noticed something strange. The same phrases kept popping up in her texts. "Let's keep this between us. You can't tell anyone. We'll meet soon, promise." It didn't feel like romance. Felt like theater. And the kicker? When I searched Alex's name online, I couldn't find anything. No speaker profiles, no LinkedIn, no social media. It was like Alex didn't exist. My suspicion turned to dread. What the hell was going on? By the time Anna got back from her conference, I was a wreck. I hadn't eaten, slept, or thought about anything else but her and this phantom named Alex. Part of me wanted to confront her the second she walked through the door, but I forced myself to wait, to play it cool and gather more information. She breezed in late that evening, suitcase in hand, and gave me a quick, distracted kiss on the cheek. "Miss me?" she asked, her tone light. "Always," I said, forcing a smile. She didn't notice the tightness in my voice, or if she did, she didn't care. "I'm exhausted," she said, kicking off her heels. "Long meetings all day. I'm heading to bed." I let her go, watching her climb the stairs, my mind racing. Her casual dismissal, her lack of guilt, it all felt calculated. The next day, I couldn't hold back any longer. Over breakfast, I put down my coffee and said, "So, how is Alex this time?" She froze, the piece of toast halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Your conference buddy. The one you've been texting late at night. The one who thinks you're witty and brilliant." Her face paled, but then she recovered quickly, her eyes narrowing. "Have you been spying on me, Eric? Don't turn this around on me," I snapped. "I found your messages, Anna. I know about Alex. So why don't you drop the act and tell me the truth?" She slammed her coffee cup down, her voice rising. "You're unbelievable. You go through my phone, and now you're accusing me of what? Cheating? With a colleague?" "Yes," I said, standing my ground. "And not just a colleague. Someone who doesn't even seem to exist. I searched for him. Anna, there's no Alex in your industry, no conference speaker, no LinkedIn profile. So who the hell is he?" Her jaw tightened, and for a second, I thought I'd cornered her. But then, to my surprise, she started to cry. "You're insane," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "You're paranoid and insecure, and now you're making up these wild accusations because you can't handle me being successful." "Cut the crap, Anna," I said, unmoved. "You can cry all you want, but I know you're hiding something. So either you tell me what's going on, or I find out myself." She looked up, her tears replaced by icy defiance. "Fine, you want the truth? Yes, I've been talking to Alex. Yes, I've spent time with him. But you've been so wrapped up in your own world that I didn't think you'd even notice." The admission hit me like a slap. "So you admit it?" I said, my voice shaking. "Admit what?" she snapped. "That I found someone who actually listens to me? Who makes me feel like I matter? Because God knows you haven't done that in years." I stared at her, my mind spinning. Part of me wanted to believe her, to buy into her excuses. But something about her confession felt hollow, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Anna's confession left me reeling, but something about it didn't sit right. Her tears felt rehearsed, her anger calculated. I didn't know whether to scream or walk away, but one thing was clear. She wasn't giving me the whole story. That night I couldn't sleep. While Anna slept soundly beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every word she'd said. The excuses, the deflection, the half-hearted admission of emotional connection with Alex. It all felt too convenient. By 3 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped out of bed, grabbed her phone from the nightstand, and headed downstairs. I didn't care if it made me the bad guy. I needed answers. When I unlocked her phone, the first thing I noticed was that the texts with it were gone, completely erased. My stomach sank. I checked her email next. It was mostly work-related, but buried in the sent folder was a message with the subject line, "Re-follow-up." I opened it and found a single line. "I've transferred the funds as agreed. Let's keep this between us." The recipient's address wasn't one I recognized, but it wasn't Alex. It was just a string of random letters and numbers at a generic domain. "What the hell are you up to, Anna?" I muttered under my breath. The next day, I confronted her again. Where are the messages with Alex? I asked as soon as she walked into the kitchen. She looked up from her coffee, her expression neutral. I deleted them. I figured you'd go snooping again. So what's the point? You deleted them because you're hiding something. I shot back. She smirked, and for a moment, I saw the cold, calculating version of Anna that I'd been ignoring for years. Believe what you want, Eric. You're the one who's obsessed with this Alex thing. Because he doesn't exist. I snapped. I've looked everywhere, Anna. There's no Alex. No speaker, no colleague, no man at any of your conferences. So who is he? A ghost? A cover for someone else? Her face froze for a moment, her mask slipping just slightly. But then she laughed. A bitter, humorless sound. Wow. You've really gone down the rabbit hole, haven't you? Answer the question, I demanded. She sighed, shaking her head. You want the truth, Eric? Fine. Alex doesn't exist. Happy now. Her admission left me stunned. What? I made him up, she said casually, as if it were no big deal. I needed a story, and Alex fit the bill. But congratulations, you figured it out. Gold star for you. I stared at her, trying to process what she just said. Why? Her smirk widened. Because it's easier than explaining why I need time away from you. Because you're suffocating, Eric. Always needing answers, always demanding my attention. I just needed space. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. And the funds you transferred? Was that part of your space too? Her smirk faltered. I saw the email, I continued. The one about transferring funds. So what's that about, Anna? What are you doing? Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw real fear behind her defiance. Stay out of it, Eric, she said coldly. You don't know what you're getting into. My blood ran cold. What the hell does that mean? I demanded, but she just grabbed her bag and walked out the door, leaving me alone with more questions than answers. After Anna left, I sat there in stunned silence, her words echoing in my head. Stay out of it, Eric. You don't know what you're getting into. What the hell was she hiding? What had I stumbled onto that she was so desperate to keep under wraps? I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't staying out of anything. I spent the next few hours digging deeper. I started with our joint bank account, something I hadn't checked in months because Anna usually handled the finances. As I logged in, a chill ran down my spine. There were multiple large transfers, thousands of dollars each, sent to an account I didn't recognize. The first transfer was 6 months ago, around the same time Anna started bringing up Alex. The transactions were sporadic but consistent enough to form a pattern. But what really caught my eye was the most recent transfer, $20,000. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding. Where was this money going? And more importantly, why? I called my buddy Kevin, an accountant who's seen it all when it comes to financial fraud. Hey man, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need a favor. Can you look at something for me? When I explained the situation, Kevin didn't ask too many questions. Send me the account info, he said. I'll see what I can dig up. While I waited, I turned my attention back to the email I'd found in Anna's sent folder. The recipient's address was weird, just random letters and numbers, but I decided to Google it anyway. Most of the results were junk, but one link stood out. A forum thread discussing offshore accounts and money laundering schemes. My chest tightened as I clicked. The thread mentioned similar email addresses being used to facilitate anonymous transactions, often tied to shell companies in places like the Cayman Islands. I felt like I was in a bad spy movie. Was Anna laundering money? And if so, for who? Kevin called me back later that afternoon. You're not going to like this, he said grimly. The account those transfers went to is flagged for suspicious activity. It's linked to a holding company that doesn't have a legitimate address, and the owner's name is an alias. What does that mean? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew. It means your wife is either laundering money or involved in something shady as hell, Kevin said. The room spun around me. Jesus Christ, I muttered. Eric, this isn't something you can handle on your own, Kevin continued. If you're serious about getting to the bottom of this, You need to talk to someone who knows how to deal with financial crimes. And you need to protect yourself, legally and financially. That night, Anna came home like nothing had happened. She set her bag down, kicked off her shoes, and poured herself a glass of wine, completely ignoring the tension hanging in the air. "Busy day?" she asked casually, as if we hadn't just had the most explosive argument of our marriage. "I know about the transfers," I said, cutting straight to the point. Her hand froze mid-sip, but she didn't look at me. "What transfers?" "Don't play dumb, Anna," I said, my voice cold. "The ones you've been making to that flagged account. Thousands of dollars, taken from our joint savings. Who's behind this? And what are you doing with our money?" She set the glass down and met my gaze, her expression hard. "You need to stop digging, Eric," she said flatly. "Or what?" I demanded. "You'll make up another fake affair to throw me off the trail?" Her jaw clenched, and for a moment, I thought she might lash out. But then she smiled. A cold, humorless smile that made my skin crawl. "You really want to know?" she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Fine. I've been moving money to cover a debt. A debt I had long before I met you. And if I don't pay it, we're both screwed." "What kind of debt?" I asked, my voice rising. "Who are you paying?" "That's not your concern," she snapped. "And trust me, Eric, you don't want to make it your concern." She grabbed her bag and stormed upstairs, leaving me to stew in my growing anger and fear. Couldn't sleep that night. The woman I thought I knew was a stranger, and the life we'd built together was a house of cards ready to collapse. But one thing was clear. I wasn't backing down. The next morning, Anna acted as though nothing had happened. She sat at the table with her coffee, scrolling through her phone, completely ignoring the fact that our marriage was on the brink of implosion. But I wasn't going to let her off that easy. "I want answers, Anna," I said, sitting across from her. She sighed dramatically, putting her phone down. "What now, Eric? Haven't you already played detective enough? You told me this was about a debt. What debt? Who are you paying?" Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought she'd tell me the truth. But then she shook her head. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," I said coldly. She stood up, grabbing her coffee mug. "You're impossible, Eric. I'm going to work." "Work?" I shot back. "Is that what you're calling it now? Stealing money from our savings and funneling it to God knows who?" Her face twisted in anger, but she didn't respond. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. I knew she wouldn't give me answers, so I decided to get them myself. I called Kevin again, this time asking if he could dig deeper into the flagged account. "Can you find out where the money is going?" I asked. "It's not easy," Kevin replied. "But give me a day or two, and I'll see what I can do." While Kevin worked on the financial side, I decided to retrace Anna's steps. I pulled up her recent calendar, which she had synced to her work email. One entry stood out. "Meeting with BL." I didn't recognize the initials, but I knew it wasn't work-related. Later that afternoon, I followed Anna. She left the house around 3 p.m., looking more nervous than usual. She drove downtown and parked near a rundown building that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. She walked inside, and I waited, heart pounding. About 20 minutes later, she came back out, this time with a man in his 50s wearing a cheap suit and sunglasses. He handed her a small envelope, and she nodded curtly before getting back in her car. I snapped a few photos from my car, then tailed her as she drove to a nearby bank. She went inside, presumably to deposit the envelope, and came out a few minutes later, looking visibly relieved. That evening, Kevin called me back. "Eric, I found something," he said, his tone serious. "What is it?" "That flagged account? It's connected to multiple shell companies, but one name keeps coming up. Brian Langston." "Who the hell is Brian Langston?" I asked, confused. "From what I can tell, he's a loan shark. A big one. He launders money through fake businesses and offshore accounts. If Anna's paying him, it's because she owes him a lot, and I mean a lot." The name hit me like a brick. BL meeting with BL. My stomach sank as the pieces started to come together. Anna wasn't just hiding an affair or covering a debt. She was involved with a dangerous man who was using her to launder money. And she dragged me into it by funneling funds from our joint account. That night, I confronted her again. "Who is Brian Langston?" I asked as soon as she walked through the door. Her face went pale. "Where did you hear that name?" "It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that I know you're paying him off with our money. So you'd better start talking before I call the police." Her defiance melted away, replaced by fear. She sank into a chair, rubbing her temples. "It's not what you think," she said quietly. "Then explain it to me," I demanded. She took a deep breath. "Years ago, before I met you, I borrowed money from Brian to start a business. Failed, and I couldn't pay him back. He let it slide for a while, but a few months ago, he showed up and demanded repayment, with interest. And instead of telling me, you decided to steal from me and lie about it? I didn't know what else to do," she snapped. "He threatened me, Eric. He said he'd come after you, after us, if I didn't pay. So I started moving money." "And Alex?" I asked, my voice cold. She hesitated, then admitted, "I made him up. I thought if you were distracted by an affair, you wouldn't dig deeper." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You thought it was easier to make me think you were cheating than to ask for help?" Tears streamed down her face, but I couldn't bring myself to care. "I was scared, Eric. I didn't know what else to do." Anna's confession hung in the air like smoke, choking the room with tension. She sat there sobbing, but I wasn't moved. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd built a life with, had just admitted to fabricating an affair, laundering money, and putting us in danger. "What's his endgame, Anna?" I asked, my voice cold. "What does Brian Langston want from you?" She wiped her tears with trembling hands. "He's not just after the money. He said he needs me to help him clean more funds. He wants me to use our accounts, my name, your name, to make everything look legitimate." My chest tightened. "So, he's planning to launder even more money, and he's using you to do it?" She nodded, avoiding my eyes. "And you thought the best way to handle this was to lie and steal from me instead of coming clean? I didn't want to drag you into this," she snapped, her fear giving way to anger. "I thought I could handle it on my own. But Brian, he's dangerous, Eric. You don't know what he's capable of. Do you?" I shot back. "Because from where I'm standing, you've already handed him everything he needs to ruin both of us." That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Anna and that man outside the rundown building. I heard her lies, her excuses, her so-called reasoning. But beneath the anger was something darker. Fear. If Brian Langston was as dangerous as Kevin said, and Anna's actions seemed to confirm it, then we were in serious trouble. And I wasn't going to sit around waiting for him to pull the rug out from under us. The next morning I called Kevin. "I need to know everything about Brian Langston," I said. "Who he works with, where his money comes from, and how we can stop him." Kevin sighed. "Eric, this guy doesn't play by the rules. If you're going to take him on, you need help, legal help, maybe even the authorities." "I'll handle it," I said, more confident than I felt. "Just get me the information." Over the next few days, I worked quietly, piecing together everything I could about Langston. Kevin sent me detailed reports on his operations, fake companies, offshore accounts, and a trail of victims who'd crossed him and paid the price. Meanwhile, I kept an eye on Anna. She was walking on eggshells around me, her usual sharpness dulled by guilt and fear. One evening, I caught her on the phone. "Brian, I'm doing everything I can," she whispered, pacing the kitchen. "I just need more time. No, Eric doesn't know. I'm keeping him out of it. Yes, I'll have the money soon." She froze when she saw me standing in the doorway. "Eric," she said, her voice trembling. "I was just talking to Brian." I finished for her. "I heard." Her face crumbled. "I didn't mean for you to hear that." "Save it," I said, grabbing my keys. "You've done enough damage." "Where are you going?" she asked, panic in her voice. "To fix this," I said, slamming the door behind me. I met Kevin at a quiet cafe, armed with the information he'd gathered. Together, We devised a plan. Exposed Langston's operation to the authorities while ensuring Anna wasn't implicated further. The key was the envelope she'd received from Langston. If it contained evidence of his activities, it could be the nail in his coffin. That night, I confronted Anna one last time. "Where's the envelope Brian gave you?" I asked, my voice steady. Her eyes widened. "Why?" "Because it's our way out of this," I said. "You want to fix this mess? Then help me bring him down." She hesitated, then went to the bedroom and returned with the envelope. Inside were documents detailing fake transactions, names of accomplices, and wire transfer records. "This is everything he's been doing," she said quietly. "But if he finds out we're turning on him, we'll handle it," I said, taking the envelope. "You just need to trust me." The envelope was a goldmine. It contained names, account numbers, and enough evidence to expose Brian Langston's entire operation. But getting it into the right hands without tipping him off was going to be tricky. The next day, I met with Emily, a lawyer Kevin recommended who specialized in financial crimes. She looked over the documents and didn't mince words. "This is explosive," she said. "With this, we can bring Langston down. But it won't be easy. People like him have connections, and if he senses we're onto him, he'll disappear before the authorities can catch him." "What's the plan?" I asked. "We need to trap him," she replied. "Get him to incriminate himself in a way we can record. Once we have that, I'll hand everything over to the FBI." I glanced at Anna, who was sitting stiffly in the corner of Emily's office. "And what about her?" I asked. Emily sighed. "She's not innocent, Eric. But if she cooperates, I can argue she was coerced. It'll help keep her out of legal trouble." Anna flinched but nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes." That evening, Anna called Brian and arranged a meeting. She told him she had another transfer ready and needed to hand-deliver the details. He agreed, but his tone was sharp. "This better not be a waste of my time, Anna," he said. "You know what happens if you screw me over." I could see the fear in her eyes as she hung up, but I had no sympathy left to give. "You'll wear this," I said, handing her a small recording device. "We need to get everything he says on tape." She nodded silently, her hands trembling. The meeting was set for the next night at the same rundown building I'd followed her to earlier. Emily, Kevin, and I waited nearby with the authorities, ready to move the moment we had what we needed. Anna walked into the building alone, her head held high despite the tension radiating off her. Through the earpiece, I heard the conversation unfold. "Do you have it?" Brian asked, his voice cold. "Yes," Anna replied, handing him the documents we'd prepared. Copies of the incriminating evidence from the envelope, doctored just enough to bait him. Brian flipped through the pages, his tone growing smug. "Good. You're finally learning how to follow orders. Keep this up, and maybe I won't have to pay your husband a visit after all." My fists clenched, but Emily motioned for me to stay calm. Anna kept her composure. "What about the next step? You said you'd need access to more accounts." Brian chuckled. "Oh, I'll need more than that. You've been useful, Anna, but if you want to keep your pretty little life intact, I'll need you to convince Eric to sign off on a few transfers himself. If he refuses, well, accidents happen." That was it. The final nail in his coffin. Emily gave the signal, and within seconds, the authorities stormed the building. Brian's arrogance evaporated the moment he saw the badges. He tried to run, but they had him pinned before he could make it 2 steps. "You think this is over?" he spat as they cuffed him. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Anna stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as he was hauled away. The moment Brian Langston was hauled away, the weight of the past few weeks hit me like a freight train. Anna stood there in the same spot, trembling, as if she couldn't believe it was over. I wanted to feel relief, maybe even triumph, but all I felt was exhaustion. Back at home, the silence between us was deafening. Anna sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. I finally broke the silence. "He's gone," I said, leaning against the counter. "But the damage he's done isn't." She flinched at my tone, setting the mug down. "I know I screwed up, Eric. I don't even know where to start making it right. You can start by telling me why, I said, my voice rising. Why did you lie? Why did you think it was better to steal from me and fake an affair than to just ask for help? Her shoulders slumped. Because I was ashamed, she said quietly. I thought if you knew about my past, you'd see me differently. I've been carrying this debt for years, and when Brian showed up, I panicked. I thought I could handle it on my own. And handling it involved laundering money through our accounts and making me think you were sleeping with someone else? I snapped. Do you even hear how insane that sounds? She looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't know what else to do, Eric. I was desperate. Desperation. That's what it all came down to. And yet, it didn't excuse the betrayal, the lies, or the chaos she dragged me into. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and fallout. Thanks to the evidence we provided, Brian Langston's operation unraveled quickly. He was charged with money laundering, extortion, and conspiracy, along with a laundry list of other crimes. Anna's cooperation helped her avoid prosecution, but she wasn't off the hook emotionally. Our friends and family found out about the ordeal, and while most were supportive, a few looked at her differently. You're lucky Eric didn't leave you, one of her friends said during an awkward dinner. Lucky. That word stuck with me. Meanwhile, I started piecing my own life back together. I closed our joint accounts, hired an accountant to ensure no lingering financial issues, and began working on rebuilding my trust. If not in Anna, then at least in myself. Anna tried. I'll give her that. She apologized, offered to go to therapy, even suggested a fresh start somewhere new. But every time I looked at her, all I could see was the lies. One evening, she sat across from me on the couch, her eyes filled with regret. Do you think we can fix this? She asked softly. I took a long breath, staring at the floor. I don't know, Anna. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Her face crumpled, but she nodded. I'll give you time, she whispered. Time didn't heal the wounds. Weeks turned into months, and while Anna made every effort to rebuild what we'd lost, something inside me had shifted. Trust isn't just broken in moments like these. It's shattered, leaving jagged edges that cut every time you try to piece it back together. We tried therapy. We went through the motions of rebuilding, but no matter how much she apologized or how much I wanted to forgive, the weight of her betrayal lingered. The lie about Alex, the stolen money, the danger she put us in. It all felt too big to overcome. One night, I finally admitted what I'd been avoiding for months. Anna, I said, sitting across from her at the dining table, I can't do this anymore. She looked up, her eyes already filling with tears. Eric, please. I've tried, I said, cutting her off. We've both tried, but I can't move past what you did. Every time I look at you, all I can think about is how easily you lied to me, how you dragged me into something so dangerous without even giving me a chance to help you. I thought I was protecting you, she whispered, her voice breaking. No, I said firmly. You were protecting yourself. And in doing that, you destroyed everything we had. Her sobs filled the room, but I felt nothing. Maybe I was too drained to care, or maybe I just reached the end of my patience. I think we need to separate, I said, my voice heavy. For good. She didn't argue. Maybe she knew it was inevitable. The divorce was finalized a few months later. It was amicable, or at least as amicable as something like this can be. We sold the house, split what little was left in savings, and went our separate ways. I haven't spoken to Anna since the papers were signed. She moved out of state, and from what I've heard, she's trying to rebuild her life. As for me, I'm still figuring things out. It's strange, starting over at 38, but in some ways it feels liberating. For the first time in years, I don't have to wonder if the person next to me is hiding something. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that trust is everything in a relationship. Without it, even the strongest foundations crumble. If you're reading this and dealing with betrayal, my advice is simple. Know your worth. Sometimes, forgiveness isn't enough. Sometimes, the only way forward is to leave the past behind. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.